Greetings, family, and welcome to another episode of Cultivate Life, where we aim to bring you all the information that we have gathered on health and wellness as it relates to the African diaspora. So, today we have a really special guest. I'm very excited to share the information that she has today, and hopefully, you gain some insightfulness about healing and just all the work that we need to do to continue to evolve on this earth plane. So share out the link with your family and friends, and we'll be right back right after this. All right, family, how y'all doing today? Today we have special guest Keisha Makiba Bowers. We share the same middle name,
I
so
know.
I feel like so special.
Yes, you are. That's so
um,
beautiful. Yeah.
yes, so you're a registered clinical social work intern and the founder of Movements for Change LLC, and you provide therapeutic services that facilitate emotional growth and transformation. So, welcome. Thank you for being on the show again today. Let's start by telling the people what it is that you do, and then we'll talk about, inner child healing.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Sister Makiba, for having me here again. It's always a pleasure showing up in your spaces, and you've had me share spaces with you quite a bit, and that tells me a lot. I really appreciate love. You just seeing this work, seeing the value in it, seeing my passion for it, and trusting me. I just wanted to thank you. So my name is Keisha Makiba Bowers, as you said, and I have a master's degree in social work. I'm currently registered for my license. And but the foundation of my work is deeply rooted in my own healing journey. My education informs much of my practice in that it helps me to have a place of research, and but the real work is in exploring my own self, going through my own self discovery, and working through my own wounds. And then the process of the healing journey has brought me to a place where I realized I had to share this process with the world. I couldn't keep it to myself. And so what I do is I help adults transform their lives from pain to purpose, and change their wounds into wisdom, to use their emotional wounds to discover parts of themselves that they didn't even know was there, and to evolve and live a full, whole life. So that's really what I do.
Awesome, awesome. So I just want to put it out there that I actually began my own healing journey with Keisha, and honestly, just being able to work with you opened up my eyes to so much about myself, and oftentimes in our own narrative, we
Mm-hmm.
place ourselves as the victim, and we're like, oh, well, I went through this and this happened. And, we can't get rid of that narrative of everything that happened to us. And honestly, working with you, you gave me the tools to really see, like, okay, this may have happened in your life, but you have the power over this, and you can really work through what you have to work through. And then after working with you, of course, I did the Sacred Woman program, and now I'm a Sacred Woman practitioner.
Oh my
So I'm just,
You're like my butter. You're
catalyst.
like my transformees that just I see what you're doing, and I get emotional. I'm just like, this is what I live for. I live to see people really take their wounds and make them into purpose. And that's what you're doing. And I used to always tell you there's no limitation. that just because you've experienced something or you're coming from this place, it doesn't mean that it defines every journey of your life in such a negative way. And you have definitely embodied. I am just like, when I see you, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so proud. I would never tell a soul that you've worked with me. But when you say it, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes.
No, of
So
course.
my
Just
ears get all warm. I live for this. So thank you. Wow. I'm like all emotional, about to cry and everything.
no
Um,
gratitude, all gratitude.
yeah, I'm so excited about all of that. And I'm so thankful, man. Oh, yes, we definitely, carry a lot of generational trauma.
Right,
And the thing about trauma is that it travels through our DNA. And this is what they call epigenetics. But it travels through our DNA, and it has a memory. And we literally feel like, the things that happen to our parents and our parents' parents and our parents' parents' parents, and that it doesn't have any weight on who we are. But in actuality, DNA recognizes trauma. And sometimes we we're not only emotionally and spiritually attached to things that might have happened, but we grow into an environment where things are being played out and we start to believe that this is who we are. That if we're being criticized and ridiculed, we start to believe the narrative of what being criticized means. And the truth is that a lot is being projected onto us that comes from someone else and their own trauma. And when we become adults, it is our responsibility to identify what these things are and to heal from them so that we can be free.
right, right. For sure. So, it's interesting that you just mentioned us holding on to this generational trauma. And I remember I was having a discussion with Dr. Love, who was previously on the show. And he said, when you think about it, the Akashic record is actually us because we were in, our mother's room and she was in her room, and, just room after room after room. We're always, you're, as a child, as a female child, you're birthed with all the eggs inside of you. So that you've been in your great grandmother, great grandmother's great grandmother's womb. And then when you think about the traumas that just we have experienced as a people, being connected to the African diaspora, you don't think about those playing out in your day to day life. So, can you talk about more how this, that trauma that's being held in our DNA is affecting us on a daily basis?
So, okay, there are hormones that we release when we're going through. So, if you're in your mother's womb and she is going through her own emotional trauma, or she's maybe going through some kind of abuse, or she might be struggling with something with herself, those hormones that she's releasing, they're going into the child, right? And so we have a part of our brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is the part of the brain that exercises our ability to protect ourselves, our fight or flight response system. And if you are not aware of all of this trauma and what has happened, it's like when you go to the doctor, one of those questions are, did you, they ask questions about your experience in your mother's womb. That's like, because it affects who we are psychologically. And so, you could have what we call a non-traumatic brain injury. And there's a doctor in the community, Dr. Jehudi Buai. He has a book called Gray Matter Matters. And it's a resource that I've turned to over the years because he talks about that psychological trauma and how it actually shifts aspects of the brain. And the amygdala is actually now heightened. And now you could be someone who is hyper vigilant. You could be someone who's anxious. You could be someone who struggles with keeping still. You could be someone who struggles with being in closed spaces, like in an elevator, or you could be claustrophobic. And you could have, you might not have had any specific experience related to being in a closed space that warrants this trauma. But because it's embedded and it's psychological, it's there and
Right.
it's real.
Right. Now, Sandra is saying, how can one prove that DNA causes trauma, especially if one is not familiar with that information? So I don't think it's the DNA, but exactly what you said about being in the womb space and the mother
Yes.
experiencing these things.
So I would recommend to just do some research. And the word that we want to research, I don't know if I can put it in the chat room. Epigenetics.
Epigenetics. Okay.
Epigenetics. And then Dr. Joy, I'm going to put her name in here. She has offered a lot of research of her own. I have not done as extensive of a research as she has. I'm one of her students. I actually had the honor of opening for her a few years back. Um, Shout out to the Fort Lauderdale Community Center. They hosted a Black Empowerment Summit, and I opened for Dr. Joy DeGroot, and she talked extensively. And she has a book called Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome. Is this showing up?
Yeah, I'm actually copying and pasting it into the main chat.
Okay, yeah, because I don't know how to. So her book, she actually talks about how it happens, but the way how I describe it, and when I do my presentations, I have a slide that I created that shows a tree, right? And you have to consider the brain as the root of the tree. So the earlier you experience the trauma, is the more that it affects the development of the tree. So if there was trauma at the earlier time, which would be the root of the tree, you can recognize and understand that the leaves and the branches of the tree are affected by that as well. And how that tree grows, it is attached to it. So that's basically how I describe it. Oh, Alexia is saying she was there. It was so informative. It was a really good presentation. Um, and so there's a lot of research that supports this understanding, and it informs a lot of neuroscientists, psychologists, neuropsychologists. It informs the work that's done out here around healing, and even with Dr. Jehudi Buwai, he and I have spoken because he actually has equipment that he where he helps to do some exercises with the brain to shift some of the dynamic of what's happening in the brain. And his book Gray Matter Matters is exceptional, where he
And
talks
I'm
about
going to
that.
post that in the
Yeah.
chat too.
Mhm.
So let's talk about the inner child. What is that exactly? Why do we need to heal it? What's going on there?
So the inner child is a part of you that feels, first of all, it responds to everything in such a deep emotional way. The inner child is that part of you that, needs for security, has a strong need for trust, has a strong need for nurturing, a strong need for affection, and so on. It's the part of you that's alive, energetic, creative, and playful. And just like when children are left to play freely, that is who your inner child is, right? It's a part of you that still carries that pain, though. If you've experienced any kind of emotional trauma in your childhood, if you were criticized or ridiculed as a child, if you had to walk on eggshells because you might have had an alcoholic parent or someone who was reactive to however you behaved in a harsh manner, screaming, yelling, sometimes hitting, if you felt like you didn't belong, if you weren't really loved and nurtured through fears and that inner child is no longer just a free spirited inner child, but now we're talking about a wounded child. If you dealt with any abandonment or rejection from a parent, if you dealt with any abandonment or rejection from family structure, family dynamics, if you felt ostracized, there are a lot of experiences that we have normalized and we have perceived them as they just happen or they're normal. But in actuality, they're creating this sense of I am not enough. So, how do you know if you have a wounded inner child? You have to ask yourself, do you sometimes feel unlovable? Do you sometimes feel like you're never good enough? Do you compare yourself to others a lot? Do you feel empty inside that you're constantly trying to fill a void through some kind of compulsive behavior, gambling, pornography, overeating, controlling others? Are you a people pleaser? Do you seek joy in controlling others by doing what they need you to do or being who you think they need you to be? These are all questions that when we get into transformative healing and the work that I do, that we bring out into the forefront. They're scary,
They
they're
are. Right.
uncomfortable. And it's also what we call shadow work.
So you said, I want to just touch back on when you said, often we normalize these experiences. And I was going to say, well, when we talk about sometimes children who have gone through maybe not physical abuse or those traumatic things where we know, okay, yes, that's abusive, we could pinpoint it, but things that are just like people talking down to you, people, just attitudes and having to walk on eggshells. People might say, well, that happened a long time ago, I'm not even dealing with that. And how do they know that this is something that's impeding their lives?
Well, it affects how you show up as an adult. Are you always defensive? You will know, first of all, Makiba, we know when something doesn't feel right within ourselves. We
Gotcha.
might try to deny it and cover it up, which we live in a capitalistic society that has taught us how to neatly pucker up our trauma, right? Because some of us have really nice jobs or we're comfortable economically, or we might, dress ourselves up. We show up as this adult, and a lot of times we just wrap our inner child, our wounded inner child, into this safe space. But we create this mask, we create this illusion of who we can be. But if you are feeling empty inside and you long to be around sincere people, authentic people, if you struggle with love relationships, if you fear that you might become an abusive parent, if you worry about being a good enough parent, if you have difficulty trusting people, if you feel that you had no role model in your childhood, these are all signs that there is a wounded inner child. And there are experiences that are there that you may be in a denial. Denial is a healthy response. It is quite normal to not want to face, because if we accept it, then we might have to accept some other belief systems that are going to negate the things that are keeping us safe. For example, a lot of people don't understand that it is okay to recognize that your parents could possibly love you and at the same time may have harmed you, that those two emotions are quite healthy. But we come into this space of we have to protect others. And in protecting others, we're denying our own truth.
Right. Right. And I think that's powerful.
That's where the healing begins. That is where the healing begins. When you can identify your own truth and learn to protect your own self by setting boundaries, learning new communication skills, assertive, healthy communication skills, asking for what you want in relationships, which this is all a process.
Yeah, it is. And what you said was powerful about being able to live authentically. Um, and if we are experiencing these things where, okay, we are a people pleaser, or we're just going along to get along, or we might feel one way about a situation, but then we're not expressing it because I want to avoid it, I don't want to deal with this, then we're not really being in touch with our authentic selves. Um,
It is true. And another thing that shows up is if we had an experience in our childhood where people were emotionally unavailable for us, what happens when we become adults is, and I talk about this in my sessions a lot, but we have what I call these make nice antennas. We want to make nice with that experience. We want to fix it. We want to correct it. So, what do you think we do as adults? We want to engage in relationships with people who are unavailable for us. We want to be in the same situation again so that we can fix it. And a lot of times you started out the dialogue around staying in the victim mode, but this is how we repeat the pattern and keep ourselves in the victim mode, because we say to ourselves, I did so much to help them. I showed up and I fixed everything. I did whatever they needed me to do, and they just couldn't give that back to me. And what we're doing is we're replaying the trauma from our childhood, and we're caught up into this cycle of needing to, and it also becomes an addiction, and that's a whole nother level.
That is a whole nother level.
It's a whole nother level. And a lot of people would say to me, like, oh, what do you do in these sessions? Like, how do you do this? What do you do? We diligently, I tell myself, and this is how I speak about the work, is I teach people how to self-partner and how to hold themselves until they are healed. Because what happens is, after years and years and years and years and years of being a people pleaser and taking care of others and pushing away our own trauma and not addressing our own feelings, we become neglectful to ourselves. And then we live in a society that says, get over it and keep it going. And I have my show on Instagram called Movement Mondays, and my focus for the month of August is around ambiguous grief, healing grief overall. But what do we call ambiguous grief? It's those experiences that we were supposed to grieve and we didn't. So in my sessions, we diligently go through the grieving process where you have permission to feel the pain and allow it to really pass through and no longer repress it in a safe, loving space with compassion.
Right, and that was my next question. What is healing the inner child begin to look like? Because I think, and this is just from my experience, when we begin to sort of like dig up what we don't want to face,
yeah,
then it's like, okay, you can recognize it, but then when you're healing it, it's a whole different process, because now you have to refeel. And sometimes we live these things not in a way where you're being oppressed by them, but in a way that's become something of a liberation. So you're being free from it. So what does that look like in terms of, okay, maybe I'm in denial about what's going on. Maybe I don't want to repeat the patterns, but I'm still repeating the patterns. So when we begin to heal, what's that process like?
Well, I have actually 10 steps, and I'm actually in the process because I do have a course that's called Healing the Inner Child from Pain to Purpose that's launching very soon. So this is where I actually teach this. So of course I'm going to drop a few gems. I can't tell all, but I do have a list that will be in I actually have a book that will show these 10 steps in detail. And it's basically 10 steps to healing the inner child. And the first step that I really employ, I ask everyone to not be afraid to do this, but you have to recognize your parents or caretakers' inability to have loved you, that it was not your fault. Their inability to love you was not your fault. I spent a lot of time in sessions getting people to stop feeling so much shame and guilt about what they experience.
Right.
Removing the shame and the guilt. And I really love Dr. Brene Brown's work around shame and vulnerability, because when we feel that overwhelming sense of shame, the narrative that we have in our mind is that we don't deserve anything else but what we've already gotten. And that is true. That is not true. That is far from the truth, because you're a spirit. You're a divine child of the universe, and you deserve all things great. And I spend a lot of time helping people to even accept that statement. If you go on my website, I have in my blog section a transformation affirmation that I created. And in it, I start with, accepting that you are pure love and light. And we have to speak these things to ourselves. So that's a huge step that I really encourage as we go into the stages of healing the inner child. First, recognize that what you experienced was not your fault. And someone's inability to love you has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them and where they are.
Right. And I think that's the hardest thing to realize because we take these traumas and we personalize them. We actually own them for ourselves. And then we begin the narrative in our head that, oh, this was my fault. Oh, he doesn't love me. Oh, everybody sucks. Oh, this and this and this. And we don't realize that we become kind of connected, or like you said, addicted to now this mantra of doing things.
Hmm.
So I know we can't give away all in the
I have
course.
some more. I have some more.
Okay, so good. I just want people to know, what they can expect while going through the program.
Oh no, I have. Oh well, with the course, it's if you want me to talk a little bit more about the course, but I did have a few more steps that I wanted to share. Um, it's so important to get closer to yourself. We are usually, and in the course, I teach this experience of being in autopilot, where we are now reacting to the world as if we're still in the abusive relationship or going through the hidden abuse or the psychological abuse that we may have experienced in our families of origin. And we start to react to the world in that manner, defensively, right? We have a list of character traits that we develop. And a lot of times, because I know for me, when I was heavy in my inner child wounded state as an adult, I was one of those people that if you told me about myself, I would be like, oh my goodness, how dare you say such things? Because I was so detached from my autopilot state. So I really want to encourage everyone to be comfortable with getting closer to yourself, both your darkness and your light, because that shadow work is going to allow you to know what you're healing and what you need to heal.
Right. Now, TT says, how important is forgiving your parent in order to heal?
Well, I say forgive yourself first. That is the first, that is more important than any other level of forgiveness. You want to forgive yourself for not knowing any better. You want to get to the place where you can feel more compassion for yourself, because that internalization will allow you to express it better. Because when you start to feel that overwhelming sense of self love, then it's easier to forgive them. It's easier to be like, you know what? They're human. They didn't know any better. They're just repeating what was done to them. But the anger and the bitterness and the resentment that you've internalized and that you've projected onto yourself will make it impossible to get to that place. So it's more important, TT, for you to forgive yourself first.
Now, I want to talk about when you mentioned creating boundaries in space. And I know for a lot of us who kind of begin, for lack of a better word, to become woke, right? And we start to move away from the ideologies and different just paradigms that we've grown up with, it sort of becomes like an isolating process, where now you're isolating yourself because the things that you are attached to is something that you no longer believe or want to participate in. So, in just creating boundaries around family, around
Hmm.
friends, around old, and as you become, more committed to yourself and your healing process, what does that look like? Because I know a lot of people, especially when it comes to family, and myself included, it's hard to create those boundaries because now we want to, please our families. We want to be around them. We want to still have these relationships. How do we create boundaries without destroying
Relationships.
relationships?
Okay, and that's a really, I mean, your questions are so amazing. That's really good. Here's the thing about boundaries. You have to remove the fear of abandonment and rejection, because you cannot show up authentically when you are worried about how people are going to receive who you are. The second thing about boundaries is you have to create a foundation of love. So if you are, we know when we're being shady, Makiba. I
Yeah.
need to see you. I feel like I'm alone. I
Oh,
want to see
my
you
God.
because I want you to. A lot of times when we are communicating our needs, if we're not using I feel statements, and if we are coming from a place of anger, you have to filter your communication before you set the boundary.
Yeah.
And then, if the foundation of how you're communicating is coming from love and compassion, however the other person receives it, that's none of your business. You have to now say, I showed up whole and pure. I showed up from a place of love. We know when we're showing up from a place of anger.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I just had a situation yesterday. Something showed up. I felt triggered. I thought to myself, I wanted to ask this question to someone because I was thinking, oh, well, why didn't they just show up honestly and say this, that? And I had to be honest with myself that in asking this question, I was really being passive aggressive.
Right.
So I decided consciously that it's not the right time, neither the space, because I might still feel some type of way. And if I show up, that could very well be a disaster.
Yeah.
And we have to be honest about how we're showing up.
Yeah.
We have to say to ourselves, do I want to control this person? Am I trying to get this person to be how I want them to be? Then that means the issue is not them, the issue is you.
Yes.
So are your boundaries valid? Are they fair? If you're dealing with protecting yourself, then by all means, it could be something simple. I'm not coming to Christmas. Let's give a true example. Let's make it real for the viewers.
Right.
A lot of people, when they become, especially melanated communities, around being conscious and aware, they might decide that they're not celebrating Christmas anymore.
Yep.
They might decide that Christmas dinner no longer serves their life vision and their life purpose, and they don't want to go. But it's a family tradition that happens all the time. And now you feel shameful and guilty because everyone else is going to be there and you're not going to go.
Right.
How do we deal with that?
How do we deal with that? Well, first, we're removing the fear of abandonment, right?
Yeah.
As you said. And then we're making sure that our boundaries are valid. It's not to hurt the person because, first of all, we might not like everybody who's at Christmas.
Exactly.
So, we have to say, okay, is this valid? And then have that discussion and that communication. What about finding alternatives?
I was just gonna say, you're in my mind, and I was just gonna say, you might say, listen, maybe we can find a neutral day where we can get together. If they don't, I know, like in my family structure, we do Kwanzaa.
Yes.
And I tell family members, you're welcome to share in that space with us. And so I know that the people who show up in that space, because if we are constantly people pleasing, we cannot know who is who.
Yeah.
Because the terms and conditions are not fair. They're not balanced. Because you're giving in. And so, of course, people are going to be nice. You're doing what they want you to do. Try building a relationship when you say no and see how they respond. If they don't respect your boundaries, is that your person?
No, it's not.
No, that's not your person.
Yeah. And Sandra said, she can relate to what we're saying, especially when she stopped being religious years ago. And that's another kind of hot topic when, your mommy and daddy, everybody was going to church and you're like, I'm not doing that anymore.
I'm not going there. I'm not doing that. I want to recognize Iya Alagbara. She said, when I was able to see my mom as a woman with her own trauma, it helped with the forgiveness process. Absolutely. That's a wonderful point, and that's what we were speaking to, that they have their own stuff. And another thing back to forgiveness is, just because you forgive someone doesn't mean that means they should be in your life.
Now, talk about that, because that's interesting, because a lot of people, they think about, okay, I forgave you, now we're good, and everything's going to go back to how it was because you forgave me, or, what's your problem? I thought you were good. So talk about forgiving, but not having that same relationship or whatever was occurring to be in your life again. Because that's interesting.
Well, I always say the closer I got to myself, the more that I learned about myself is the more that I was able to see others for who they really are. Because when we're anxiously attached and we want others to change and be how we need them to be, we can't see who they are. We're more so seeing the potential and what we want them to be. And that keeps us in trauma bonded relationships. So when you get to the space of ultimate consciousness and you can see yourself and how you are in relation to those around you, you know when too much of someone is just too much. You might be able to manage one dinner meeting a month with your mother or your father or that person. Okay? So you get comfortable with saying, okay, I do forgive them, but I understand that they're still showing up in a certain way that still is hurtful,
Right.
right? So then I have to protect myself because self-preservation is the key to life.
Right. Right. Now, talk about trauma bonded relationships. What is that?
A trauma bond is the need, keyword, the need to connect with people and situations that harm you.
Mm. Okay, so people might be like, that don't sound right. Why am I going to do that? But we do that. So,
Absolutely. It masks itself in codependency.
mm,
So the way the trick, it's a tricky little bugger. The trick of the situation is that you this person needs you. They just moved to your neighborhood and you realize that they have children and their children are unable to do certain things. Maybe the family can. So you're helping. You're going around. You're helping, but they might make remarks about you when you see them. They may say some things, and you might say to yourself, "Oh, that's just how they are." But those kids need me.
yeah.
I'm gonna do what my part because I'm a helper and I'm here to help people. So you've masked yourself, you haven't addressed your own trauma, and now these people are a part of the platform for you. It's to bond and connect.
But then we get mad after we connect with them because they didn't respond to us and then
Yes.
we're looking for them to respond.
And then what I always hear is, well, I did this and I took them out and I took them to get ice cream and I did all of these things for them.
Yeah.
But you knew there were red flags.
Yeah. Now,
So that's when we get into the addiction.
wow. So that's what spirals into the
Yeah.
addiction.
Yeah.
Wow. This could go deep and deep and deep and 8 different levels of deep. Sandra said, and we're not picking on you, Sandra, but she
You
said
had a lot of comments.
another hot button. And I feel like
That's a hot
that's
button
a
for
lot
me.
of us.
A lot of women have that hot button.
Right? I don't
Yeah.
know, maybe like I don't know how many, but I feel like for a lot of African Black women, right, we have issues
And
with our
I'm sorry.
mothers.
I want to say a lot of women.
A lot of women. Okay.
Yeah. Because I'm working with a lot of women and they're coming in all shades and sizes.
Yeah. Okay. So for a lot of women, so we're not even gonna attach it to just us. A
Mm-mm.
lot of women
Mm-hmm.
have issues with their mothers.
Absolutely.
Why is that?
I think I would be a millionaire if I knew why. Some people have a need to be needed, Iya Alibara said, and that's accurate. And that's what we call codependency. And that need comes from a void, a sense of feeling empty,
Yeah.
and feeling like I'm not enough. And this is the only way people are going to see me and like me. And when we talk about our mother wounds, we talk about having a mother who was so wounded that she did not know how to resolve that pain. And what she did was she had children and she had daughters and she projected that wound onto them. And it feels right because it almost feels like, who else would I project this onto? I have a daughter and you're there and you sometimes that daughter reflects a reminder to that mother of some things, maybe of, mistakes that she may have made. That's a big one. Or maybe that daughter shows up so bright that this mother now feels jealous.
Hmm.
My children playing outside. So this mother now feels jealous. And so the projection shows up in many ways.
Wow.
Having a jealous mother makes women attract to jealous women.
Bright Star said, "My mom and I are coming to terms now. We feel her parenting effect. I felt resentment. I was left on my own. She had the viewpoint that she did the best that she could."
And it's true. She really did do the best that she could. A lot of us don't want to hear that you did the best that you could. A lot of us want to hear, I'm sorry.
Right. Well,
And
get the sorry. How do we move forward?
how do we move forward? Yeah. So you have to make closure. And it's funny, I was having this conversation with Efulayo. Shout out to Efulayo. We had this wonderful, this is what we were talking about yesterday, and I was telling her um, a big part of what has helped me in my journey was when I learned from her and Yeye Fini about the journey of finding closure on your own without needing to confront this person or have them show up in the way that you need them to show up. And one of the practices that I had to implement was visualization. I had to start to visualize myself being nurturing with my mother, brushing her hair, hugging her, and also visualizing her doing the same with me. And it became like a nighttime ritual for me.
Right.
And I found that I couldn't go to my bed without doing it. I started to get a sense of comfort
Right.
from the visualization.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting because we don't realize how powerful that can become in that process. Bright Star is
Oh,
Alexis, and she
yes.
said that, going back to her comment, feeling the parenting effects of her mom and feeling that resentment because she had her own viewpoint, but now the mom has the viewpoints on the way she's parenting.
Mm-hmm.
So is that something that needs to be addressed with a boundary, or like how do we address these when the parents, hey, I did the best I could, but you got to do this and you got to do this and you got to do this, and you're not doing it right. How do we address that?
All right. Well, I want to talk about that, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if her in her statement she was saying that her mom has new viewpoints on parenting because maybe Alexis is modeling a new way. Maybe mom shifted her perspective. And sometimes that happens when this mother becomes evolved and she sees the daughter trying and doing something new and she's like, oh wow. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you do get the mother who is still unresolved, still in her pain, and now here you come as a daughter and you're doing your thing and she still wants to say to you, well, you need to do this, you need to do it this way, you need to be a certain way, you need to why aren't you taking your children to church for Easter?
Yeah.
And that is where, of course, definitely some clear boundaries will have to be set.
I see. Ia says, I had to do the same. Sometimes people don't have the capacity to address it on your time.
Absolutely. They're on a different timeline. And another thing that I had to do in my own relationship with my mother is I had to understand that these titles of mother, daughter, brother, these are just vessels of how we came into this earth. But in real life, she's a child of the universe like myself, and
Right.
she still has her own spiritual path and her own journey.
Right. Right.
Like, I don't really have the right to define how that journey should unfold.
That's true.
I really don't. And the ego, the inner child is so attached to the ego. That is me, 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 my.
Right. Right.
But ego and spirit are different.
Mm. I think a lot of times, people will use the ego to say, well, you hurt me, so therefore, da 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 da. But then when you begin to evolve into spirit, you're realizing, hey, that's their responsibility. What is my responsibility for
Mm-hmm.
myself? And just within my own story, you know, sometimes my whole thing was I wasn't expressing what I needed to express to people. I was just wanted to be like, okay,
You're
but just holding it, and then one day it just,
explode.
just
Mm-hmm.
explodes. So I had to write letters. And then when I would feel triggered by something, I would go back to that letter because that was something I wrote when I was calm or calmer, right? And then if I chose to share a portion of it or how I was feeling, it made me be able to communicate better instead of just
Mhm.
communicating through the emotional, vomit of
Space,
it.
right. And I do that activity. I ask I do the letter that never gets sent kind of thing.
Yeah,
Because the key is to not repress the feelings, it's to get it out.
right.
Even if you can't get it out to the person or get a picture of them and scream, say what you have to say to the picture, but
Right.
release it. Don't keep it in. Do not keep it inside. And I tell people all the time, if you do keep it inside, there's a consequence because it will affect your physical health.
Yeah. Or you'll be down the street looking crack crack.
Yeah, and we have to shine our light. We don't need to allow anyone to have us feeling looking, as they say in Jamaica, pop down.
Yeah. No, we not doing that. We're not doing
No,
that.
we are not. No pop down here.
So let's talk about the course. I
Oh,
want
I'm so
everybody to know that they can heal, begin their journey, just as I have with you,
excited for
and
you.
to know
Hercules, Hercules.
their inner child and be able to pinpoint. Because the thing is becoming aware and pinpointing exactly the wounds that we're holding on to and the trauma that we're holding on to. So I
Yeah.
do want you to share about the course.
I'm excited. I'm actually hosting a Zoom orientation tomorrow, Friday. Tomorrow's Friday
Yes.
at 7 p.m. And I've been asking people to DM their email addresses because I can send them the mass invitation and the Zoom invite to join in on the orientation.
Okay.
So I am on Facebook and on Instagram.
Okay.
Um,
Typing
but
that in. So that's why I put my you on the full screen, so I'm not.
oh, yes, yes, yes. And then I feel so weird about it because I feel like I have to talk to someone, even though I'm sure people are watching and they're going to be watching. But so yes, I will be taking goddesses. It's strictly for women. I've been getting a lot of messages from brothers like, "What about us?" But I'm not ready for that as yet. We are taking 10 women only at each course at a time. I'm only allowing 10 women into the course, and it's for 8 days. Twice a week we meet over a 4 week period, and the course actually has a series of I have my notes. A series of There's a theme to each session. So it's 8 days towards healing the inner child from pain to purpose. So the day, we focus on who she is, identifying the inner child. Then we go into how could you have learned to protect her? I have the power to protect her. So you learn the tools to protect your inner child now as an adult. We go into the journey of what did she need when she was a child. A big part of healing is recognizing the things that she did not get. That is the root of what she needs to feed herself. And the theme of my work is around reparenting and self partnering. So you have to learn the process of becoming your own mother, finding the mother within you and reparenting yourself from that compassionate place. So we go through activities. I have the power to provide for her. I will be having a guest yoga breathwork educator during each session, different educators that I'm inviting to be a guest teacher in my course. And then we go into what did she learn, during that journey? False narratives. We got to unravel them. We're going to go into how she survived because those survival techniques are no longer serving her. And then we're going to close with just acknowledging that she's pure love and light and that you have the power to love her and to help her thrive. So we're going to be learning thrival techniques.
Nice,
And I'm
nice.
excited.
It's very, very comprehensive. And you also mentioned your Monday night lives.
On Instagram,
So I'm gonna.
Movement Mondays at 9 p.m. every Monday. And what I've been doing is actually inviting guests to join me. I'm excited. Next, we're August. We're focusing on healing grief and ambiguous grief, things that we should have grieved that we've just carried along, loss of relationships, marriages, divorce, death, people who we may have in our lives who are still alive, but we have to grieve them. They may have Alzheimer's, or they may have had a traumatic brain injury. I don't know. They may have met in a car accident. We don't see these things as grief, but they are grief. It's actually movements underscore for underscore change.
All right, let me get.
And 9 p.m. every Monday, I go live. And so you all are invited to join me.
It's an
Yeah,
amazing show,
thank you.
everyone.
And I'm going to have Makiba soon. I have a date for you, actually. I'll be messaging you.
I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm
Yes.
excited. So, we talked about the trauma bonds, and I think
Yeah,
it's
I'm
very
actually going to have to wrap up very soon. I have a session.
yes.
Um,
So, just really quickly, in the reparenting
mhm.
ourselves, do you have just any quick tips for the people?
Oh, well, I do have a quick tip. Whenever you find yourself wanting to be impatient and mad at yourself for something, that's when you need to reparent yourself. That's an inner child cry. If your house is dirty because you've been sad and you've been in the bed and you get up and say, I am such a slob. This is I'm a piece of crap because look what I did. You need to ask yourself if you're self sabotaging, and you need to gently, you have to tap into that gentle voice.
Nice, nice. So I'm just putting we talked about the epigenetics, so research epigenetics to find more on how the DNA and trauma and how that is affected.
Yes, please do. And movements underscore for underscore change.
Right, we have that here and tune into IG
Yes.
Live.
Yes.
So I know you have to go
I
because
do. I would do this all the time. I thank you so much. I offer one-on-one sessions, my transformative healing sessions. I also practice Reiki. I'm a level 2 Reiki healer, like Makiba here. And I love to do distant Reiki. I am a big, huge into it. And I struggled. Like I didn't know how to channel any of my psychic premonitions or my abilities. And I found that when I did Reiki, a lot of information came to me through that. And so I love Reiki because of that. It has helped me find a balance into accepting that part of myself and also being able to help others. So if you go to my website and you could book a distant Reiki session or a one-on-one intuitive healing, transformative healing session.
nice. And the website is the mymovementsforchange.com.
Yes.
They put that up there real quick.
Thank you so much, Makiba, for having me. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. And I hope you all enjoyed the discussion. Um, give thanks. We're definitely going to have you back on
Yeah,
again.
I have so much to share. Oh my gosh, I can. There's
Yes, yes.
so
So
much. Each
take
of
it.
the topics we talked about is a session. Like
Right.
I could have been here for an hour talking about trauma bonding. I could have been here for an hour talking about self discovery. I could have, there's so many wheels to turn.
So definitely check out Sister Keisha Mondays IG Live at 9 at Movements for Change.
Thank
This
you.
is the information for the course. When does the course begin?
August 26th. I'm actually giving folks time to register and pay. So that's why I'm doing the orientation. So we meet on Wednesdays and Sundays at 7:30 to 9 p.m. So August 26th will be my first session.
Okay, so that is the link for you guys to register. Also, send her a DM,
And
right?
I never close every opportunity that I have to say this. We all, it is when we think about the people who impact us. Some of us were blessed to have that one person who might have seen something in us, or showed that kind of love. And I always, no matter where I go in my life, I have to recognize my father. His name is Aya, which everyone's like, wow, that's an interesting, and it is African Adinkra symbol, but his father gave him the name Aya Bowers, and he's no longer with us in the physical realm. But I just truly believe that he poured into me because he saw this woman that I am now. When he transitioned 5 years ago, I was nowhere like this at all. And I feel like he poured into me because he knew that I was going to have to help others heal. And so I always have to recognize and honor him. Thank you.
Give thanks. Give thanks.
Yeah.
All right, so I was just putting up what we discussed, Dr. Joy DeGry, post-traumatic slave syndrome. That's something to definitely research. And this is the book by Dr. Bly. I can't wait to have Dr. Bly on the show.
Oh, he's awesome. Yeah. He and I want to do some work with him. We were just talking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's going to be amazing. All right,
Alexis, oh,
family.
she said he was a great man. She did have a chance to meet him. Yes.
Aw.
All
Yes.
right, so.
All right, well, give thanks to you. And family, give thanks for tuning in. As always, we just love having you. We just love doing, these lives. And if you guys have any, topics that you think will be something that's great to cover, we always want to approach it from the standpoint of how we can heal and better ourselves. So
Yeah.
definitely get at me at Cultivate Life. And until then,
Thank you,
stay well,
Makiba.
be
Talk to you
well.
soon.
Alrighty,
Bye. Peace.
bye bye, peace. So, yes, stay well, be well as always, and enjoy the rest of your day, people. Give thanks.